Dave, this is not your first trip to Moscow.
No, it isn't.
It's number what?
4.
Could you describe the difference in how you felt and how you feel between the first time and then the other trips as you came back?
87 was the first time. Now it's 10 years later, and the change is unbelievable. When we were here 10 years ago, if you got in a car to go someplace, you were often the only car on the street, on a wide street. Be 1 or 2 cars. Now it's the typical Tokyo traffic jam.
That's not necessarily a good thing, is it?
No, not a good thing, except it said to me immediately, things have really improved. You can't have all these cars, all the services that go with the cars, all the things that go, the gas, the oil, everything has to be picking up, at least in this department.
Now, 87 was a period when Gorbachev was already the head of the country. Perestroika had started. Glasnost was much in vogue. So, did you have any apprehension when you came? Because people who came before Gorbachev during the Brezhnev times and when things were quite strict and somewhat dangerous, they were very apprehensive. What about you when you came in 87?
Well, we had been trying since 1958 to get into Russia. And our State Department had us play along the periphery of Russia. We played in Poland first, and then went to Turkey, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, East and West Pakistan, India. So, but never into Russia. In Afghanistan, our audience was mostly Russian, which made me wonder what's going on here. And of course, we found out later what was going on there. But to get into Russia, we started twice. And we're on our way here and received word that it had been canceled, or for the good of my fans, I shouldn't come.
When was this? You remember?
You'll have to remember when the Olympic Games were boycotted.
1980.
That was the first time. Hartman.
Yes, Arthur Hartman was the ambassador.
And then we started again, and a similar situation arose where we weren't allowed to continue. And the ambassador could have been, but not Whitlock.
Was it Strauss?
No.
No.
But he told us,
Matlock.
Yes, that if we came, that our fans would come, but there'd be somebody taking their name at the door as they entered. And that would not be good for those fans. So he advised us not to come. We were in France, ready to go like on the next airplane, and this happened.
So what about 87? Finally, you made it. Did you have any of that apprehension when you came in? Did you think that maybe, well, things had changed, but not all that much? I mean, what was your feeling about coming in 87?
There was a list, and it was the beginning of cultural exchange that had been canceled for a long time. This was the first time it was being reopened. Each country had a list of artists that they would accept. And I've heard there were 100 on our list and many on the Russian list. And Nancy Reagan picked us number 1, and somebody from Russia picked us as number 1. So there was no doubt that who was going to come.
Did you feel uncomfortable at all? Or on the contrary, that Nancy Reagan was the one who selected you? I mean, is she that much of a music fan? Does she really?
Oh, she is.
She is?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so was Ronald.
Uh-huh.
The one time we played at the White House, there was a huge meeting, and he said, meet me over by the elevator that will take me up to my second floor bedroom, because I want to talk to you. So he said, that's one place everybody thinks I'm going to be gone, but I can still stand and talk to you. And it was in that conversation that we figured out that we would come here. But Nancy was spearheading it more than Ronald. But he had so many wonderful stories about when he was a radio announcer. And also when he had the Ford show, he had the big band show. And he knew a lot about jazz music and the big bands.
Tell me this, Dave. The fact that that Nancy Reagan participated in this and that Ronald Reagan, the president, did you have any feeling at all that you were being used politically?
Not politically, because I have represented the United States on many occasions in the cultural exchange program. And you see, the greatest voice of America, the voice of freedom, was always being broadcast from the United States with a wonderful guy named Willis Conover.
I knew him very well.
Did you know
Sure.
Willis?
Music USA.
Yeah. And you know, people, when we got to Poland and various countries, they all sounded like Willis's voice. They imitated him so much that their English, you'd think you were talking to Willis. Now, this doesn't seem much to the average person in the United States, but you could actually go to jail for listening to Willis Conover.
For listening to the Voice of America.
Yeah.
Sure.
You could.
Yes.
And we found out that the Russians were listening and making records of my music and a lot of jazz by the doctors taking X-ray plates.
Sure.
And playing those some way they could record.
They recorded on X-ray film, and it was called Listening to Bones, because on the film, you could see the bones.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was called Listening to Bones.
Oh!
So you're on a lot of people's bones, believe me.
Well, I never had this explained, how they could do that.
Yeah. Well, you know, very, very talented and technical people. But let me tell you, you know that in Russia, or rather in the Soviet Union, jazz was considered to be ideologically a no-no. It was considered to be somehow imperialistic and bourgeois, although jazz is anything but that, its roots especially. How was your first reception? 87, you come in, for the first time you actually meet with Russians. How was that? How did that go?
Unbelievable, because they wanted us to play here in Moscow 10 nights in a row in a stadium. Now, I've never been treated like this in my life. It's more like a big rock group. And I don't like stadiums and this mass kind of audience. So we elected to play 5 concerts at the Rossiya Auditorium, which I think seats 2,700.
That's right.
In 2 hours, all the tickets were gone for all 5 nights. Then we went to St. Petersburg. We were in a 3,000-seat auditorium. They were all gone for 5 or 6 nights. Only they said, please move to a larger auditorium. And I said, you mean tomorrow I'll go to a larger auditorium? They said, yes. I said, how many does it seat? They said 7,000 people. I said, well, how will the people know? How can you advertise? They said, you come, they'll be there. It was full at the big auditorium for the next 3 nights.
So what has brought you back again and again and again?
I really believe that jazz is the voice of freedom for the world. And that all people seeking freedom seem to love jazz. And I think we represent this desire for freedom. Our music is something that you must have to succeed, and that is freedom within tremendous discipline. And that's what jazz represents.
But you come back to Russia because what? You feel that there's a special hunger for that here, or do you have Russian roots by any chance?
Maybe a fourth. My grandmother was Rainstorski, but she doesn't know whether she was Polish or, I think she called it White Russian.
White Russian, that's Belarus, yes.
Yeah. So I may have a little of that, but she played a lot of Russian piano music.
So what brings you back? I want to get back to that. I mean, do you have a special feeling for this place? Because, I mean, 4 times in 10 years, that's a lot.
Yes, I do. The reason I became a composer instead of just a jazz composer, but I wanted to move into orchestral, bigger things, was because of Shostakovich's Fifth Symphony. And then I loved Mussorgsky, Stravinsky, and Russian music in general, Rimsky-Korsakov, Prokofiev. And I'm drawn here musically.
Let's talk about jazz for a minute. You said it was probably the music that most expresses a sense of freedom.
Right.
It's really not all that popular nowadays, even in the States. I mean, if you're a jazz fan, as I happen to be, sure, you can go to the Blue Note in New York or the Vanguard. With Vanguard, not so much anymore. It used to be more jazz, now there's less. But still, you can find some wonderful music. But if you look at what people are buying, the kind of CDs that they're buying and stuff, jazz isn't really number one or even close to number one. Why is that, do you think?
All what you said is true, except the foundation of American music is jazz. And you're hearing it all day long in a Broadway musical. You're still hearing the foundation of jazz. If you go to the cinema, it's still that foundation of jazz. Country western music has the foundation of jazz. Then most of your composers that are played the most in the United States, the foundation of jazz, whether it's Bernstein or Aaron Copland. In the beginning, it was Charles Ives.
Yes.
Now, Charles Ives was way ahead of Europe. It's very hard to be ahead of Europe. And we had this genius that was so far ahead of the world, but he used our marching bands and our jazz ideas all in his classical music. And it seems, my teacher told me, that the music of any country that will live on and on and on will always use the folk music. whether it's Stravinsky
Absolutely.
in Russia,
Right.
Bela Bartok in Hungary, Darius Milhaud in France. It's always back to the roots.
Let me ask you this. Obviously, rock is also based on jazz. But it's much more simple, if you will. It doesn't call for as much involvement, on the part of the listener. Is that what explains its huge popularity?
Yeah, that's probably what it is. And the beat being so obvious
Mm-hmm.
and so fundamental that I think that's what makes it very acceptable. And the melodies aren't complicated,
To say the least.
and the harmonies, but always you'll have somebody like a Frank Zappa, who was such a genius, come out of anything that's going on. Because in any idiom, there's these guys that grow up right out through it, whether it's a Duke Ellington in jazz or whomever.
Would you agree that jazz, at least basically, is the result of what Black America has done, the Afro-American?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Without the Afro-American, there wouldn't have been jazz.
Now, there are not really that many white Americans who've made a name for themselves and really contributed to jazz. You can name a few: Jerry Mulligan, Gil Evans, yourself. Why do you think that is? What is it that makes it such a specifically, I would even say, ethnic kind of music, at least in the sense of Black people just keep coming into it? It seems to be their idiom much more so than white people's.
Yeah, there's a mixture that keeps changing. When I was growing up, I always worked in Black clubs. If a white man came through the door, I'd think, what's he doing here? And the first date I took my wife was to a Black club because I wanted to see how she would react, and I wanted her to know this is going to be my life. This is where I'm the happiest. It's right in a place like this. And I have, in the old days, a tremendous Black following. All over the South, we integrated clubs, universities, auditoriums. And there were a few other guys. I wasn't alone. Louis Armstrong was doing this. Benny Goodman.
Yeah, I forgot him. I'm sorry. Yeah, Artie Shaw, right.
Tommy Dorsey.
Right, Harry Dorsey.
James,
Yeah, Harry James, right.
and Stan Kenton.
Yes.
Uh,
Glenn Miller,
Glenn Miller.
Yeah.
And you see, somebody like George Shearing, who is blind, this problem never came up. He listened to the man or the woman.
Were you accepted quickly by the brothers, as it were? Were you easily accepted by them, or did they kind of say, who is this guy coming in here?
The greatest thrills of my life were to be accepted by Duke Ellington. My wife and I wrote a show called The Real Ambassadors for Louis Armstrong, which talks all about the Louis being a real American ambassador. And he had a following in the world that was bigger than probably anything else except maybe John Kennedy. But maybe not.
Maybe not.
Africa, wherever you went, a tremendous following. And that's so wonderful.
An interesting thing is probably the most popular two Americans of the 20th century are Louis Armstrong and Muhammad Ali. Two Black Americans.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you say that you were quickly accepted by these people, right?
Yeah, because I was quite radical when I was young. and Kid Ory
Yes.
liked my music, and Charlie Mingus liked me very much.
Did you ever meet Art Tatum?
Oh, that was my God. And a funny story about him, I was playing intermission piano when I was maybe 19 years old.
Intermission piano, that's what, during the breaks?
Yeah, for the Star.
Uh-huh.
And her name was Cleo Brown. And she was a African woman. And so great. And I was so honored. It was the first great international person I could play with. And I told her, I want to meet Art Tatum. And I knew she was a friend of Art Tatum. So she gave me a note. She said, you take this note to Art Tatum. So I found Art Tatum about 400 miles away in a place called the Streets of Paris in Los Angeles. And I went in there, and there were only 2 people in the club. Now, this is to listen to the greatest jazz musician I think ever born. And maybe he'll always be. All of us respect him like he was God. 2 people there, Art Tatum and the bartender. Empty.
Lucky bartender.
Lucky bartender.
Yes.
So when he got off the stage,
He was playing?
he was playing.
Good Lord.
I went over and I showed him the note. And he could see a little with one eye. He read the note. And he said, well, how's Cleo Brown playing? And I said, oh, she's got the fastest left hand I ever heard in my life. He said, come over here. Sit right here. And the piano was raised in an oval bar. And he went opened the bar on hinges, climbed up there. He looked down. He could see me down there. And he says, he raised his right hand. He goes, then I knew who had the fastest left
He
hand.
wanted to prove it to you, right? That's a wonderful story.
Just me alone. I mean, he knew he was the best, and anybody came near him to challenge. I've known guys that thought they could challenge him, and they went whipped away from the day.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, we haven't got all day. I've got to get back to Moscow today. You're playing, let me see if I've got this right. You're playing with the Russian National Orchestra and Chorus, your own composition, right? And it's called what? It's called Mass to Hope.
Right.
A celebration.
Yes.
Okay. Does this imply that it has a religious context? The Mass is usually something religious.
It's a mass.
It is a Mass.
Yes, a Roman Catholic mass.
Are you Roman Catholic?
I wasn't when I wrote it, and after I finished, I joined the church.
Really?
I was never in any church before.
At all? Now, your roots are Jewish, are they not?
No.
They're not.
Mm-mm.
So you were what? You were an agnostic?
No. I was raised in a Presbyterian church,
Mm-hmm.
but they forgot to baptize me. They baptized both my brothers and not me.
So you wrote this before actually becoming a church member?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. What's the message? I mean, I realize you talk about music and what's the message. If you can't hear it, don't ask, I suspect. But you still wrote it with a certain...
The message, I've written 10 oratorios. And when I would boil down what I'm trying to say, there's usually a core in each one. The first one was the temptations and teachings of Christ. And I thought the center of that was not being understood in Italy, which is the center of the Catholic
Roman
Church.
Catholic, indeed.
Wasn't being understood in Germany, which is the center of Lutheranism. Wasn't being understood in the United States. And it's probably the most important thing that Christ said. Love your enemies. Do good to those that hate you. Now, right there, you can dismiss everything else, and each country try to understand that one sentence. If they don't understand it, there won't be a world to live in, because we're always going to have enemies. But he said, love your enemies. That's the hard thing to do.
Is it not impossible?
Nobody's ever really tried it on a worldwide situation where when somebody gets out of line, you pour in love.
The reason I ask is, after all, Christ said these things some 2,000 years ago, and in this particular century, we've probably killed more people than in all 19 others before this.
Right.
So one would somehow think, maybe those teachings simply are not realistic. Let me tell you why I say this. The ideas that lay at the foundation of the Soviet Union, the ideals of a just society where there would be no poverty, where there would be complete equality between all people, turned out to be a tragedy in the long run, a catastrophe, in fact, for the Russian people and for some parts of the world. The idealism turned out to be something very negative, ultimately. So what I ask you is it really possible to hope that that particular thought, which is so important and so central to the teachings of Christianity, can ever really come true?
Buddha, 600 years before Christ, said the crowning enlightenment is to love your enemies. Every great religion has this at the basis. And we have to get this message to the different religions of the world. There has to be these meetings of the greatest minds. Look what happened to Malcolm X when he went to Mecca. This guy that was not too much on the side of the law.
Not too friendly either.
Not too friendly. Completely changed when he finally got to the center of his own religion.
So they killed him.
Not the people in Mecca. The
No,
people
exactly.
in the United States
The people he
that
brought.
hadn't been to Mecca, that didn't understand the religion that they're preaching. And this is why I keep writing these pieces, is to get people to understand their own religion and to see that we're all basically the same. We're all created from one beginning man, if you believe in the Adam and Eve story. If you believe in science, we still came from one man or woman.
Some of the most terrible wars in history have been religious wars. Some of the most intolerant people in history have been religious leaders. Churches have shown tremendous intolerance for other religions. And even today, religious leaders, be it Ayatollah Khomeini in his time, or be it even the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church who refuses to meet with the Pope, all of these are demonstrations of intolerance, of no desire to find common ground, and yet these are the people who represent the churches that represent the religions. How can you hope for any kind of real breakthrough when even these people, with all their teachings and everything they've learned, And certainly they've read everything that's been written about their religions from, back to back. How can you hope for anything positive to come out of this? I mean, I'd really like to hear you say something that would get me to be more hopeful.
I think that if you confront on a worldwide basis through meetings, call them summit meetings, where each religious leader, the top man, has to defend his position with the other leaders of religion, and real debate about why they are not following their own religion. For instance, the Ten Commandments says, "Thou shalt not kill." Everybody ignores it. A nice meeting could go on for a couple of years on that sentence. What does it mean? Thou shalt not kill.
It seems to be pretty clear what it means.
Yes, right. And try to understand that they don't have the proper leadership to understand the basic rules of their own religion, and that they must come together. I have been in countries where all day long you hear lies broadcast. There should be a universal place where everything is examined. And if there's a lie going out on the air, they must go to a place like Nuremberg where they were judged and made to defend what they said. Not just think they can say anything. Because look what happens when a Stalin convinces the whole country that nothing wrong is going on and 50 million people are being murdered. There's got to be a way for the people to demand the truth. Know the truth, and the truth will make you free.
When I listen to some religious music, and at this point I'm thinking about Bach,
Yeah.
everything he wrote was actually religious music. Not being a religious person myself, I must tell you, I walk away with a sense of brimming happiness and a different attitude towards the world around me. It doesn't last all that long, but every time I listen to that music, it does something to me and for me. What would you like people to walk away with after they've listened to this composition of yours? What would you like their feelings to be?
Well, it's called A Mass to Hope. And I would like them to walk away thinking there is much hope left in this world if we will behave properly.
When is your birthday?
December 6th, in a few days,
And you will be?
77.
Well, 7 is a lucky number.
Oh, good.
So 77 is double luck. And may I wish it to you and your music and to everything you do. And there's a lot more to do. I want to thank you for coming to Moscow and sharing this with the people here. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn.